Welcome back to Love and Understanding. My name is John Driggs, your host. Well, I'm really excited to introduce today's guest. But before I do, let me just remind you that I rely on you to continue my work. So if you find my conversations valuable, please consider heading over to my Substack page. I've included the relevant link in the feed of this episode. I'll also be hosting a small group in Brian Head, Utah this July. This will be a rare opportunity to share a more intimate space with me and a select number of people who share similar values and aims. If you're interested, head over to my website, johndriggs.org, where you can find more information under the Retreats tab. Okay, well, today I'll be speaking with Britt Hartley. Britt is the author of a #1 bestseller in secular spirituality. Her book is titled No Nonsense Spirituality. Britt has a master's degree in theology. She considers herself a secular spiritual director, sufi mystic, nihilism survivor, religious deconstruction coach, and a program director for spiritual direction training. Britt was a blast to speak with. She has one of the most brilliant minds I've come across. She expresses herself with such clarity and with both a humility and a confidence. I'm grateful to have her as a leader in this space, especially to keep her male counterparts in check. I learned a lot from our conversation, and I hope you do too. And now I bring you Britt Hartley. Well, I have Brittany Hartley with me here today. Brittany, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, this is going to be great.
Yeah. So why don't we start with just kind of a brief introduction of you, what you're up to these days, and how you got to this point.
Yeah, so my story just kind of starts that I was raised Mormon and deconstructed Mormonism, went into Christianity, lost my faith in Christianity and God in theology school. For some people, they find that very freeing. For me, it was very difficult and led to a period of existential crisis. And then found a lot of tools in philosophy and various forms of spirituality that were really helpful for me in rebuilding my life after religion. And so now I am an atheist spiritual director. It's my full-time job. And what that means is I really help people on their spiritual paths with existential fears or beliefs, and or just digging into meaning, purpose, digging into what we would kind of call the soul space without any particular beliefs that I'm pushing people towards. So I don't have a religion where if you're struggling, I'm going to try to bring you back to God. We're going to explore lots of different options for what a meaningful, connected, even spiritual life would look like for you. And most of my clients at this point are people who are even, atheists or highly secular who feel like they really are struggling with meaning and purpose, but don't feel like they can go to religion for that. So that tends to be most of my clientele at this point.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, there is, meaning tends to be a big sticking point for people that lose their faith. So I want to get into nihilism a bit with you because I know you struggled with that, and I know a lot of people do as well. But let's maybe lay a bit more ground for what it means, what this spiritual landscape means or looks like to you.
Yeah, so that word spirituality, and you can replace that word if that word is triggering for you. I'm not married to it. Language in this space is really difficult, as you know. But really, there are many spiritual traditions that, or even religions that are non-theistic or even really don't have a lot to say about the supernatural. And so when we're talking about an overall definition, the definition that resonates most with me is that spirituality is a deeper connection to the universe inside of you and connecting outside of you. For many people, that includes a supernatural element. For me, not necessarily. So a lack of spirituality would be a lack of connection outside of self and being really disconnected and numbed out also with your connection to inside of you too. And this is why we get a lot of imagery of eyes in spirituality, or spirals or labyrinths. It's this process. We get a lot of spirals in even in Abrahamic forms of religion. It just seems to show up everywhere, where you're connecting more outside of you and you're also connecting more inside of you. And I would call that spirituality.
Yeah, I like that, particularly emphasizing the word connection there. I think a lot of my listeners will be familiar with some of the non-dual traditions, and there's this phrase called interbeing, and I think it's a really simple way to get curious about that connection between that inner and outer part. So when we look at interbeing, I don't know, like something that my daughter, for example, is really good at. When we sit down to eat our dinner, we'll often do some kind of ritual before we eat, whether it's a moment of silence, gratitude, or, in this case, she'll look at her plate and she'll see the fullness of her food. So in her food, she'll recognize the farmers that planted the seed and tended to the crops, and she'll see the truck driver that drove it to the store. She'll see the cashier. She'll see me that made the food, her mom that worked so hard to pay for it. And, you can follow that food back to the air, to the soil, to the sun, and there's just this expansive growth that those walls start breaking down. And so this connection or this interbeing starts to become more visible. So
it's interesting you say that, because Noah Rasheta, who's also a Mormon turned somewhat Buddhist, that's the ritual that he does with his kids around dinner time. Yeah, so I've heard of that from him.
Cute. Yeah, I've heard a bit about Noah. I'd actually love to have a discussion with him. I just found out he lives not too far from me. We're both kind of tucked up against the Uintas.
Yeah, he's fantastic. So. His podcast was really helpful for me when I was trying to kind of separate out the things in Buddhism that I could really implement into my life, and then some of the other parts of Buddhism that, as an ex-Mormon, we can be very allergic to truth claims and just have this high allergy to anything that feels like a metaphysical truth claim because of our sometimes religious trauma. And he was really helpful in kind of helping me to separate that and find some really fantastic tools in Buddhism. So I'd love to hear a conversation between you two.
Great. Yeah, maybe you can introduce us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's for good reason that people that have recently lost a faith become skeptical to truth claims. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. So that's understandable. But let's shift to this crisis in meaning that a lot of people experience.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just give the stage to you, but with organized religions, there's almost this, it's like we go through the drive-through and we get this prepackaged belief system all neatly wrapped up. It's like, here you go. And the meaning is built into it. And so when all that collapses, it's like we're standing on rubble. There's nothing. There's no purpose, it seems. There's nothing left. And so we often just fall into this kind of darkness. So I don't know if you want to kind of walk through your own experience and what you see that's common in others.
Yeah. And if you're listening and you were maybe raised secular, it's something that I've been experiencing more and more as I talk to atheists and other people in the secular community, that if you're raised secular, you may not have an experience where you struggle like this. Like, some of this obviously is setting yourself up for failure in some ways, and I recognize that, and so I think it should be okay, in this maybe post-religious space, that some people were raised in it and didn't seem to maybe have this level of existential crisis, but some weren't, and some really struggled, and that should be okay. So I really did struggle with things that for a lot of secular people just were not a struggle at all, because they were just raised with the concept that everyone dies and you try to be a good person and you have one life. And But if you're raised in religion, just in your brain, you have these certain anchors or these foundations that you're building everything on. So for something like Mormonism, or really the Abrahamic religions in general, you're really building on truth claims. These are the things that are true. And because these are true, this is my morality, this is my community, this is truth, this is how to live your life, these are my ethics, this is my identity, this is my sense of who I am, this is my meaning, this is my purpose, and all of that is built on these foundations. So when you lose those truth claims and you lose that foundation, it's not just, oh, I was Mormon and I'm not anymore. It's actually like neurologically a crisis. Neuroscientifically, this is a crisis for the brain, and it can take years to recover.
The whole nervous system.
Yeah, your whole nervous system is just screaming that you are dying and you are in danger and you don't know up from down. You have no story through which your brain can filter information, which is how brains filter information. You have no motivation because you have no sense of goals. And so all of even like just your dopamine, your serotonin, like just things that keep the brain ticking all fall apart. And so for me, it was very much an existential crisis, led to very significant depression, suicidality, even in my thoughts, because my brain just had no way of orienting. And then also, if your brain is used to, I'm just going to find out what's true, and then I'm going to know how to pattern my life, you start looking around and saying, okay, then what's true? And not realizing that's still a religious pattern that your brain is doing, just looking for what is true to try to build your life. And so what can be really helpful, especially about Buddhism, but also some other approaches, is that it was new information for me that you actually don't have to build a life based on metaphysical truth claims that you have to have faith in, that there are other ways to build a life, that there's other ground to stand on. For other people, that's intuitive. For me, it was not intuitive at all. It's something that I had to learn. And so I had to learn, how do I make sense of what's true and what's not if maybe we're not interacting with ultimate truth at all? How do I build a moral life? What does it mean to live a moral, ethical life? And why should I, if I'm just a monkey floating on a space rock in the universe and there's no eternal tally and nobody cares, right? How do I rebuild community when I don't really have a shared myth that we're all going to show up in this community? How do I rebuild that? How do I raise children where they get a sense of identity and belonging and moral education and some of these benefits that we know benefit children, but now my children are operating outside of religion? And so all of that was very difficult for me and took time to intentionally rebuild and put back into place. Whereas religion, if you just believe the thing, if you just believe the story, whatever the shared myth is, the religion will just give that to you. It's why we create religion in the first place, because it does all of that work for you. All I have to do, like if you want awe and ritual and rites of passage and identity and meaning and purpose and community and ritual, if you want all those things that we have markers that tend towards human thriving, even longevity, you could just walk into a Mormon church and believe the story, and you'll get that on a platter. And so for me, a lot of my existential crisis was just around this foundation falling apart and not knowing how to put my life back together. But as you process, as your brain kind of adjusts to this change in foundation, there are other ways to build a life of meaning, purpose, community, even spirituality, without having to build them on truth claims. And that's what helped me to move forward and feel like I'm not in that place anymore.
Thank you. Let's unpack some of that. First, yeah, I think it is hard for a lot of secular people who didn't grow up within some religious framework to understand that shift into nihilism. But there is just conditioning there. So it does take a lot of unwinding and deconstructing. And then you can't stop there, because that's the nihilistic point. So there is a conscious, active rebuilding that needs to happen. of some healthy sense of self. I mean, humans are meaning makers. We're model makers. We're storytellers. And, that's how we move through the world. That's how we move through relationships. So the other thing I wanted to pick up on is that there is so much safety couched in being given a belief system, being given clear rules, clear expectations. There's this really funny story from Herodotus, one of the first historians in ancient Greece. He tells a story of King Darius, and he is trying to teach the Greeks a lesson. And so he calls this group of Greeks forward and he asks them, how much money would I have to pay you for you to eat your fathers when they died? And they're like, what? What are you talking about? No amount of money, And so then he calls this other group, the Calations, and he says, hey, how much money would it take for you to burn your fathers when they died? And so that was the Greek custom. And they're like, whoa, no amount of money, And their tradition was to eat their dead fathers. And so he was kind of just showing that there is this separation between natural law and social law. And so a lot of the Greeks started picking up on this. And one in particular was Protagoras, who famously said the individual is the measure of all things. And there's several ways people have interpreted this. And one is that shift into meaninglessness. And other people actually can take it quite optimistically. But one of the hardest parts that I brought up, that safety that's couched into that pre-given structure where it's just all our expectations, all our rules are clear, is that it shifts responsibility from nature or God to the individual. And that's really hard. I don't know if you experienced any of that weight that you'd like to speak to.
Yeah, it's really hard trying to separate out kind of what you are from your conditioning. And this is, again, something that meditation and these inner exploration practices can really help with. It was just really hard to separate that out. And I'm still finding things today. I'm about 15 years outside of religion at this point. And I'm still finding things once in a while where if I examine that thought and examine the roots of it and just kind of keep exploring where that thought comes from or that instinct comes from, and I'll find that there was something religious or Mormon or cultural or patriarchal or whatever about it. And so I'm still finding things, and I dislike sometimes in deconstruction spaces where people almost kind of get on their high horse and say, like, I've deconstructed religion, it no longer affects me in any way. Because this is a path, uncovering conditioning and deciding what you want to do with that conditioning is really, to me, feels like much more of a lifelong journey than a one-time event. And it's part of being on a spiritual path is continuing to explore the universe within. And I'm still on that path. And so I don't like to talk about deconstruction or reconstruction as if it's this big one-time, religious event, and I'm over that now, and I'm completely now existing outside of society, and I'm unaffected by anything. Right. That's just not. I don't think that there's evidence that we exist in that way. And certainly me myself am not in that place. And so I really embrace the idea that it's a journey. I'm continuing to connect outside of me. I'm continuing to explore and connect and decide what to do with all this conditioning that I still carry.
Yeah, that's something I really admired in exploring your work, is that you did take the responsibility and say, hey, this work is never finished. It is a continuous exploration of picking things up and saying, oh, okay, what is this conditioning and how is it affecting or controlling me? Or so yeah, I applaud that. And just to piggyback on you more, I'll often hear that, even people that grew up in a non-religious home, they will say, I didn't grow up Christian. I'm not affected by a Christian. It's like, no, you're in Western culture. You are very much influenced by it.
Yeah, an example of that is, for me, was like really understanding, like I was deconstructing patriarchy and felt like I was getting some sense of that side of conditioning. And then, but I was still years ago doing a lot of like hustle culture where I felt like I had to work to earn rest, things like that. And then as I was exploring that, even though like I'm not a Puritan, like so much of that comes from our collective Puritan roots, that we're not just historically, as far as like us not being Native American, historically in America, we are not just a Christian nation, but specifically this Puritan form of Christianity that still affects us in many ways, even though I've never been a Puritan. You know what I mean? And so I'm still finding all kinds of things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I want to speak particularly to the patriarchal structure, because you've been doing a lot of work, it seems, recently in that area. And I think if anyone's paying attention right now with the Epstein files and with the current presidential administration, and there is so much we still have to do on that front. So I don't know if you want to speak to your exploration of this area recently.
Yeah, I'd really want to. I really want to ask you about this. That's a big. The top of patriarchy is such a big thing, but where I think I would love to get your input on something is something that I'm noticing now in exploring how patriarchy continues to affect spiritual spaces even outside of religion, is that something that happens sometimes in meditation spaces that I'm learning a lot more from talking to women, is that a lot of times, like, male meditation teachers or male gurus kind of will assume that everyone was able to form a very strong, solid ego and sense of self, that now the spiritual path is to work towards transcending it, ego dissolving practices, ego deaths even. And that seems to be kind of spoken of as if it is universal, that like, hey, we all have this like really overinflated sense of self. We all need to kind of dial it back. And for most men, I would say like, absolutely, absolutely do all of those things where you realize that the universe doesn't revolve around you. And what we're learning more now, and some male meditation teachers, I've really been in discussion or debate over this, because sometimes it's hard for them to see, is that if you're a woman or a queer person who grows up in a patriarchy, you may not have a fully formed sense of self. Now, do you still probably, there are some things that are universal, like, do I have thoughts and desires and things like that? Of course. But oftentimes women don't get to finish the project of creating a fully formed sense of self and ego. And then they'll leave religion, they'll leave patriarchal religion, they'll go and explore these kind of more meditation, spiritual spaces or psychedelics. And they'll get a lot of voices from men saying like, you need to kill the ego. And so they'll spend a few years trying to dissolve their ego, and it's not really working, and it's not seeming to benefit them the way that it's seeming to benefit men. And so something that I think is missing here is that I think we have to realize that if you were raised in a patriarchal religion or culture as a woman or queer person, sometimes the spiritual path for you to get to that place of healthy balance where you have an ego at the table, but it's not taking over, is that you need to actually finish creating a self. And that means getting a little bit more loud, having preferences, voicing preferences, having boundaries, getting bigger. And that's something that we just never hear from more of the male side of spirituality, even outside of traditional religion. And anyway, I just wondered if you had some thoughts on that, on this concept of self. And do you feel like in order to benefit from ego dissolving work that first you have to have a more fully formed sense of self? Or do you feel, anyway, do you have thoughts on that? It's just something that I'm noticing more and more of.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think I would have to kind of reframe the question a bit, if you don't mind, to fit what I have to say about it. And I think maybe it would be important to note that I am bi or open or pansexual. And when I grew up, everyone called me gay or a girl, and I always felt like I wanted to be a mama, kind of had a more nurturing quality. And I was confused about my gender for a while, and one of my closest friends ended up transitioning from female to male. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so it was something I even considered for a while. Over time, I ended up loosening boundaries there and kind of just stepped into an open framework. And I don't know, didn't let gender do a lot of speaking and let, like, I get it. Let me give an example. Like, the only time it should matter if I'm gay or something, it's like, or do you want to sleep with me? Is that what you're asking? Otherwise, I don't know why this is important. Or is there some sort of discrimination or, whatever it may be. So yeah, I entered more of a open framework. And as the years have gone on, I've really come to accept what people might call more masculine sides of myself. I lost my hair. That helped. But no, with this question of building a self and then killing it, I think any spiritual teacher that is teaching their students this is confused about spiritual practice in general. The self is not an enemy. And if we're paying attention closely, I think we'll notice, and don't take my word for this, but investigate it for yourself. For me, there doesn't seem to be this stable thing called I. I think we often put on different hats or different outfits throughout the day. We might go to work and all of a sudden we have our employee or employer hat on. We come home and we've got our mother or father or parent hat on. We have our brother or sister. So we have a number of different roles that we take, and they kind of take this particular shape or form. And these aren't bad things, right? It's important to know what my relationship is in a particular circumstance, right? If I'm a mother, there's things that entails. If I'm an employer, that means something. So the ego or the self, it's very useful. I love the self. All these parts are selves. So no, the building up and then killing. That doesn't even fit my framework. Rather, my approach is to, and there's a few ways to do this. You can start from the inside or you can start from the outside. But what I tend to do is to maybe point people at a particular dimension of their being, which we can maybe call pure awareness, which doesn't have shape or form or color or really any qualities other than knowing. And then if we investigate it further, we might see that it has another quality that is unconditionally accepting. This pure awareness, it allows the pleasant and the unpleasant in without struggle. Now, we may have certain conditioning or certain parts of us that say, I don't like this, or, ooh, I do like this. And awareness just recognizes this. It is equal. It just has this higher perspective, you might say. So when we're working with our self or many selves, many parts of ourselves, I tend to point people toward this pure awareness that can then hold ourself or many selves and just give them that unconditional acknowledgement, acceptance, and love that we're all looking for, right? And to hold them in a place of equanimity. So it's not to say that we act out of an angry part or a part that has desires or other harmful behaviors. But we just say, hey, I see you. I love you. I accept you. We can maybe take it a little more impersonal. We can say, you're kind of like Ram Dass says, we can look at people more like trees or parts of ourselves like trees. We can see that a tree didn't get enough light, and so it bent this way or that way, And so it's crooked, but it's not like we blame the tree for it. And so when we're able to kind of open to all the parts of ourselves in that way, there's an ease that settles in, and we can begin to move a little more intuitively and with more recognition of this interbeing, which is, again, test this for yourself, but I think you'll find naturally compassionate, naturally loving. It takes joy in other people's joy rather than gets jealous. It's calm in situations. It has this quality of equanimity. Building up and destroying, I don't think that's quite necessary. We can, of course, recognize qualities or skills, and we can work towards cultivating those. So, if you grew up with a lot of anger in your home or abuse, and that lives in you, it lives in your nervous system, we can do a practice of loving kindness, say, where we take objects or humans or pets, and it's both a concentration and a conditioning exercise where we sit and we just wish them well, may you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from angry. May you be at peace. And so we kind of just cultivate and condition these feelings of goodwill. So, we can move skillfully through the world in that way. But another thing to pick up on about what you said, particularly about women having softer egos, I think there's truth to that. And I see it particularly in women, especially in Mormon women, or women that came from Mormon backgrounds, or maybe Catholic backgrounds, or other religions where culturally women get married very young. And so they haven't had time to really come into themselves, explore themselves, get to know their interests. And they take on this, we talked about these caps or these outfits that they wear. So they take on this role of motherhood, and it almost consumes them. You know, it's like, of course, I'm going to put my babies first. And so they are thrown into this role of motherhood. And then we see, kind of as the kids start leaving the nest, it's like, shoot, who am I, you know, without them? And I don't know, there's different terms in psychology and for this process, but it's sometimes called individuation or sovereignty. And it's this process of kind of uncoupling from a role or leaning into someone or something else that really shapes your identity, so you can see what blooms from the inside. And so that's kind of my role, is just, hey, here's a mirror. Who are you? I don't want to tell you who or what you are. Like, here's this awareness. Let me point you to your own heart, and let's see what blooms. So I don't know if that can answer your
let me
questions.
translate what you said to like how I'm integrating what you're saying there. Something that really helped me as I was trying to reestablish just my relationship with myself was this concept really of like a boardroom. And in that boardroom, my shadow self is there and has information and things to say and energy and lots of things going on there. And all of my previous selves are there, and my inner child, and all of like my feelings are all at this table. My rationality has a seat at this table. My relationships and who I am in relationships to others, you know, the hats that you were talking about we wear. And it's this boardroom, and if I can hold space for all of it, I can tap into what you call this higher awareness space, where rather than just kind of reacting, I can sit and have kind of a boardroom meeting and say, oh, anger has something to say at the table today. What information do you have for me? Or my inner child is feeling something really strong. She's really showing up right now. What are you feeling? And like, oh, I'm feeling this, and I can offer some love and support to that part of me that's still a 5-year-old girl or whatever it is. And that relationship with myself has just been the temple that I've been looking for my whole life, right? It's the home that I've been looking for my whole life. And what I found as far as this journey with patriarchy for me is that a lot of times male teachers who are teaching this concept kind of assume that the ego, which is, I agree with you, not something to kill. It's a part of my psyche. It has great gifts, fantastic gifts and energy. It also has a shadow side. But there's sometimes this assumption that because they grew up in as a straight, maybe white man in a patriarchal culture, that everybody else had like their loudest voice at their boardroom table that maybe needs to quiet down and listen to others, is that very strong sense of ego. And that will show up in the way that they're teaching meditations or doing inner work with people. And it wasn't until I listened to more women in this space who could point out that like, hey, maybe for you, your ego is the loudest voice at the table, and we need to do some practices to get some equanimity with your boardroom here. But for women who grew up in patriarchy, and I think queer people experience this too, that the seat at the table that is your relationship with yourself, you don't even like that person doesn't even have a voice, isn't really at the table, like is just like hiding somewhere, because by the time you're 5 years old as a woman, you're taught to smile and that certain emotions are not okay. You start repressing yourself. You start repressing your needs. You're told that your
Stand in
needs
the
don't.
shadows.
Yeah, your needs don't matter. I started training. By the time I was 12 years old, my goal in life was training for what I am to someone else. I'm going to be a mother to someone else. I'm going to be a wife to someone else. I had no concept of what am I to me? What are my preferences? What are my... And so listening to especially feminine voices in this space really helped me to undo some of that conditioning and say, for me, especially when I'm recovering from Mormonism, my spiritual path was not working with my ego because it had too loud of a voice in the boardroom. My spiritual journey was actually this relationship with self and allowing her to be cared for also. And it was a spiritual practice for me at 35 years old for the very first time in my life to order a pizza with the toppings that I prefer. It was the first time I had done that because my automatic preference is, what does everybody else want? I'll pick off some things and make my own pizza that I like or whatever. For the record, it's pepperoni and pineapple, which nobody else likes except for me. And I just pick off whatever. And that's something that I feel like is sometimes missing in the meditation space from, I think, well-intentioned men who just kind of assume that their struggle with an overinflated or an ego at the boardroom that's a little too loud is also what everyone else is struggling with. When for women coming from religion, that seems to be not the spiritual journey that needs our attention the most. Not to say that we don't ever experience moments of ego. It just was not my major issue in that boardroom, sacred space where I could kind of sit above it and watch it all with just love and compassion for all these different aspects of my psyche. And so for that journey, I had to get sometimes what men would call being selfish or being a little bitchy and it was women who taught me that is also a valid spiritual journey too, in ways that sometimes men in this space don't validate. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And we can kind of just translate it to a literal boardroom, like men are going off or they take up all the oxygen. And as soon as the woman has a voice, it's like, God, she talks so much or she's so
there was
demanding.
There was a study that if women talk 30% of the time, men perceive it as over 50%. Yeah. And so there is some, that's a great overlap. But I think what we're going to is the same place. I just think that sometimes, and I'm not an expert on what percentage of that is nature or nurture as far as differences in gender and how much of that is socialized and not. That's above my pay grade. But I just know that I've worked with men and women long enough to know that sometimes your path to that boardroom where all of you has information and strengths and weaknesses and something to offer that table, and you can just sit and kind of take it as information in this place where you're aware of all of it, that there are different paths to that place and based on kind of how your boardroom is operating.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing maybe I just want to say here, something me and my partner, I don't know, we stand out a little bit differently in this space. We're both gender queer, we're both bi or pan, and we tend to see that a lot of the time people can cling to sex or gender in an interesting way. And there's no doubt it's important to acknowledge that, there's patterns, right? Stereotypes exist for a reason. But I don't know. So in spiritual circles, you'll see a lot of masculine and feminine work. And then they build out these whole worlds of what that is. But then say a woman that maybe is more, she wants to be in the boardroom. She wants to be the tough one. She has more traditionally masculine qualities. Sometimes these women get demonized. And they're like, oh, you haven't tapped into your feminine or... So I think it's important to be careful not to force our generalizations onto people.
Yeah.
I think it's always important to remember that we are individuals. And so
Yeah.
let the individual speak.
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
are you?
And I think some of that masculine, feminine language, there's some evidence that that language in spiritual spaces can be a pipeline to more kind of alt-right ideologies where like you have to be a trad wife and you have to be this kind of man.
For sure.
Which is a trap for both people in that space.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like there are times where I really wish even though I understand that, we've just kind of called these traits masculine and these traits feminine, I sometimes wish that we could just like call this side blue and this side red or whatever. Maybe not even blue and red because even then that has like
maybe
gender
call it what it
connotations.
is, right?
Just like, yeah.
Call it what it is.
Yeah. Instead
recognize,
of,
because I think it's important. There is old wisdom in the yin and yang, right? There are complementary opposites.
Yeah.
And so if we can, it's our brains are always looking for shortcuts to say, okay, yes, feminine, masculine, great, that I can hold on to, but let's really examine what we mean by this. And then when we look at it and we say, oh, actually, okay, I have all of these qualities and maybe I'm a little short in this particular one. And so if I'm looking for a business partner or a partnership for a relationship or for raising kids together, then it would be actually nice to pair this particular quality with, or this lack with someone that has it,
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe being just more particular about the specific qualities rather than the generalization. And I get it, that's hard work.
Yeah,
but
it is hard work. And it's one of the reasons that I really like working with the heroine's journey as kind of a mythos just to kind of work with. Because the end of the hero's journey is that and in our stories, in this grand archetype that we have of male stories, the end of the hero's journey is that they slay the dragon, they get the treasure, and they bring it back to community. And there's certainly value in that story. But the end of the heroine's journey is the balance between what we have traditionally called the masculine and feminine, that you can rest, that there's intuitive, that there's creativity, that there's that side of things, but then there's also this ability to run a boardroom meeting if it's time to run a boardroom meeting, or that kind of strength. And the heroine's journey is the journey of how to find balance with all of those complementary, sometimes paradoxical traits. And working with that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, cool. Maybe let's shift now into some more practical tools for really secular people in general, but more particularly people who are transitioning out of a faith. And I want to start with ritual. I already kind of mentioned something my family does at the dinner table, but if you can just expand on why ritual is so important to the human experience and maybe why. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's great that you bring up ritual because scientifically that is actually where you would start if you're really in psychological distress. It does amazing things for just psychological stability in your brain. So really, if someone is kind of floating what we would call floating in the void, is what it's called, when you just really have no way of orienting up or down. You can't even really make a decision because you have nothing by which to make decisions. What we first do in that space, and there's quite a bit of data behind this, is first we just figure out some of your core values, because core values are not things that you tend to choose from some combination of nature or nurture. Again, the percentages of that are above my pay grade. There are some core values that seem to resonate more than others for whatever reason. And so when we explore those core values, because we don't actively choose them, there was never a day when you were 5 years old that you decided that compassion mattered to you more than justice. It's just something that as you lived your life and took on experiences, some core values just in your story just seem to resonate more with you. Okay, that's an anchor. We can start there because that's not something you choose. That's something you discover. And then when we also get into how you connect, and what I do for this is there's a big study where we gathered all the ways that humans experience connection and awe and this feeling that we feel when your ego's a little bit quieter and you just really feel connected. And we made this we organized all these answers into this tree of all the different ways that humans experience this. For some, it's political activism. For some, it's creativity and getting to a flow state. For some, it's pagan practices and kind of rituals. For some, it's meditation. And there's like two main branches of meditation. One is more meditation for a purpose, and some of it is just maybe stillness. Anyway, there's these different branches of meditation. And there's all these different ways that humans experience just connection. And so when I can engage with a client or a person or a friend with, okay, what you've been hopefully alive long enough that there was a moment that you felt being a part of something bigger than you. When do you feel that? Do you feel that at a sunset or looking at a starry sky or when you're at girls' lunch with your friends or when you read a good story? When do you feel that? And when I combine some of your core values that we can explore, and again, if you've been repressed as far as self-development in religion, sometimes that may take longer. Like we may have to just spend some more time exploring what your core values are. But when we can get a sense of your core values and your connection, then that is something that we can build on. And then we start to introduce rituals that are really a reflection of how you connect and and the core values that really drive you. And so when we start to put in rituals are not just like what religions do to indoctrinate you. Like it's so much deeper than that. Scientifically, we know that rituals do four things. They increase pleasure, they decrease pain, they help process emotion, and they mark values. And so when you have a regular rhythm in your life that on Sunday morning, I listen to my favorite podcast and take a walk, or I go to this church, or I do that, what it's signaling to the brain is that you're safe enough that you know what to expect and everything is okay. And when you leave religion, you don't have any of those signals. All the signals in your brain when you're struggling leaving religion are you are in danger. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I'm feeling very anxious. And so when we can get a sense of your rituals, especially when they really connect with you, it's your favorite quote that reminds you of a value that's really intrinsically important to you, that can actually calm your nervous system and really give you just a lot of psychological stability. And so we don't have to choose them completely arbitrarily. Religion will just give them to you. But we also don't have to do them arbitrarily. We can build these rituals into your life from how you authentically connect to outside of you and the core values that authentically really drive you and feel meaning for you at the level of experience. And we need everybody's core values, in our society. And that tends to be where I start if someone is really struggling and has no sense of how to orient themselves.
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's when the first night I met my partner, I'm not really one for small talk. I'm a recluse, and if I'm going out, we're getting deep. But my friend who lived with me at the time, she brought my partner over, introduced me, and our conversation kind of just started with, hey, what is your core value? And she said integrity. I was like, great. Mine is honesty and humility. I feel like they can't be separated. And turns out, we end up getting together. She had 4 kids from a previous marriage. They're so fully my children. But when we first moved in together, we're like, okay, well, let's build a morning ritual. Both of our parents had done something from the Mormon faith where we got together in the morning, read a scripture, and it's just a nice little 30-minute ritual. But so we decided, okay, let's gather or come up with 12 virtues that we want to study, one for each month. So we whittled them down to, our top 12 virtues. And so every morning we gather at 8 a.m. to memorize a poem, scripture, and then we read from a wisdom tradition and talk about our monthly virtue. And then we sit in silence for 3 minutes before we go on with our day. And the kids love it, I mean, as you said, you can see the structure and stability it brings. And there's so many ways to be creative with this process. We also used to, before we lived in the mountains, we used to do Sunday church in the mountains where we'd just go up, have a fire, and hang out. Nothing too special, but just connect with nature. So, yeah, I'm interested in hearing some of yours, just maybe give listeners ideas of how they can build their own.
Mine are unique to, because some people, especially coming from Mormonism, there can be a tendency to want to make someone a new prophet. And so I tell people these are between me and my partner and the uniqueness of my own family, and not something that truly I think is copy and paste for any other family. So my family is, we have adopted children, and so we're not kind of related by blood. And so I wanted to kind of mark our values that we are a family, even though we're not blood related. That was something that I really wanted to, as far as marking values. So when anytime that we're at dinner or lunch with all 6 of us, my family of 6, we'll hold hands and we'll say, Ohana means family. Family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. My children are very small. It's just a Lilo and Stitch quote. It's not from, the Bhagavad Gita or anything. But it's me reminding them that, yes, we are 6 very different people that are not related, and biologically, and that's not what a family is, and this is what a family is. We do that every time. Sunday morning, I do Sunday church. For me, learning is such a high core value for me, and truth seeking. And so we have a time where we're all reading books, and then we kind of talk about what we're reading. I do a lesson, like a moral education lesson from a book every Sunday. And then my partner is not a book reader at all, just not his thing, not a book reader at all. And we will go take a walk because he's a nature guy. And so our Sunday church is reflective of both me and my partner's values. We read. I do a lesson because I'm a teacher. That's something that comes really naturally to me. And then we take a walk, and that's less of my thing, but I'm supportive that is spirituality to my partner. And then my kids are starting to come up with their own things that, I can ask them, how do you feel this thing? And my oldest is 14, and he knows that walking the dog at sunset is the thing that makes him feel that thing. And so sometimes even just on his own, he'll go do that, and so there'll be room, hopefully, as we grow as a family that we can integrate some more of these things. What else do I do? We have different holidays that we do that are unique to us. We celebrate Star Wars Day, and I use that as a moment to talk about, in simple terms with my kids, this concept of good and evil, or resistance and justice, and all these things. We use all these themes from it. And so our rituals really are embedded into our family's life. And I started off with just one. The first thing that I wanted is, I liked gathering as a family for a prayer, but I feel like I couldn't say, "Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day" anymore. And so that was the first one. And then I started adding Sunday church. And then we have, a New Year's tradition. And then we add Star Wars Day. And then we have, this is what we do for Christmas. And you get different Christmas traditions in our family. And my hope, and my kids are still young, so the jury's not out yet, but my hope is that even though I'm raising my kids outside of religion, that they have a sense of identity and belonging in this family. And they know psychologically that they're safe and that they're well cared for. And they know that Friday night is movie night. And they know that Sunday morning there's no screen time. And we do, we read and we take a walk and then we play a game as a family, and they expect it. And so I'm hoping that they're getting a lot of those psychological benefits that they would have had in religion, of just knowing that they're safe and knowing what to expect and building some sense of identity as a very valued person in our family. And, I'm doing the best I can, but I can say that developing rituals is just not so important for children. Like, the data on that for children is just overwhelming, as far as like even something like family dinner, what that does to lower anxiety and depression in teens and things like that.
Yeah.
But even just for me and my own psychological stability, just having a sense of I have saints around me, of people that inspire me, and quotes around me, and personal rituals that I do with my partner, rituals that I do with my family. And I feel like I'm, not only did I replace what Mormonism used to be for me, but it's actually authentic to me and my values and the uniqueness of our family. And that's that's the beautiful part of deconstruction. It can be really hard. It was very hard for me. It's not always hard for everyone. And sometimes it's not something that you have to really deal with at all as far as religious deconstruction. But for me, it was very difficult. But like the treasure at the other side of that is when you rebuild all the things that you loved about that in a way that's truly authentic to you and your family. And that's when things get really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I want to just pick up on the adoption piece, because I've adopted my children too, right? And I recently watched this beautiful film called After Yang, and the daughter in the film was adopted, and she had this older brother who was actually like a robot AI that was meant to help nurture her and teach her about her culture. And anyway, some kids at school said something about her parents not being her real parents. And so she's asking her brother Yang about this. And so he takes her to a orchard, and he shows her a tree. And it's just, a regular tree, and it's grown. And then he walks over to this other tree, and it shows that one of the branches has been spliced, and that there's another branch from a different tree that's kind of been taped on. And he's like, is this, a tree? Is this branch a part of this tree? And she's like, well, really? Kind of. He's like, oh, okay. And he walks to another tree where it had actually finally taken and is now a part of that tree. And he's like, well, what about this one? And for me, I don't know, the tears came falling. But anyway, yeah, that's beautiful.
It feels like a reclaiming, because in the tradition I come from, there's this sense that when you adopt children, that you kind of graft them onto this tree of Israel, and they get grafted into the family. And so that story hits me very deeply, because it feels like a reclaiming of that story outside of, the religion that I was raised in, but still holding on to the beauty of the idea of it.
Beautiful. So your oldest was 14, you said?
Mm-hmm.
My oldest is 13. He's so great. Recently, we've had kind of a chaotic schedule, because some of the kids are doing ski school, and they're getting home late, and everyone's kind of just split up. And so we've been having late nights, and so we'll do like a show and dinner rather than sit across the table, because most of the time we sit together at the dinner table. And our 13-year-old is like, can we please just not do a movie and just sit across from each other? I'm like, oh, what 13-year-old? Think I love you. He's like, what, you just want to like sit across from me and talk to me? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh, I love you.
Yeah, that's really sweet. My 14-year-old won't watch movies with me anymore because our tastes are splitting up as far as what we enjoy watching. But there'll be moments where that he'll still come to my room and just lay down and not say, "Hey mom, I want some connection," but you can just tell like, "Hey, just and just want some connection here." And it's so cute.
Yeah, a little touch in. Mm-hmm. It's cute. So, just a few more, pick up on these little traditions or rituals. My kids love going on a walk with mom at 7 a.m, and they take the dogs as well. They love that, and that's such a great start to their day. But one personally that I have done for a long time, and I highly recommend, especially for people who experience more of that nihilistic meaninglessness. The first thing I do when I become conscious is I just recognize the utter awe of the fact of the matter. It's like, what in the world is this? Consciousness. Like, there is the lights are on. There is this mystery in front of me. So I just sit and bathe in this awe and that curiosity, and it brings a vitality to the system that I think can be really useful. So if you're struggling, just
the morning routine
to try out.
that I do, I kind of do it in two parts because I'm not a morning person, and I really struggle. Like my first thoughts in the morning are usually nihilistic of a sort. It's just kind of how my brain seems to operate. And two practices that have really helped me to kind of start my day with that kind of that feeling is I'm not wearing my necklace now, but I usually have a skull necklace that says Memento Mori, and I say Memento Mori, and just remember that you will die. And I do a short, if I'm running late, I'll just say that and run out the door. But if I have a minute, I do this self-guided meditation where I imagine that I'm 90 years old and my brain's not really taking in new ideas and my body is not working. And I'm kind of at the end, and I'm just and my kids are grown, and my taste buds don't quite, work the same anymore. I don't appreciate something, and I really just get into it. And then I wake up to my 40-year-old body, and my 7-year-old comes in and, gives me a snuggle. And how much money would you pay when you're 90 years old to just experience that moment? And then I go make breakfast and I can still taste food, and I can stand up because my hip hasn't gone out yet. And it brings tears to my eyes because it starts off a morning of my brain is very neurotic by nature. And I have a positive relationship with it, but it still wakes up neurotic and depressed and pessimistic and all the things. But when I go through this guided meditation, when I really am able to get into it, waking up to your body when you're 40 years old and your kids are still 7, and just being in your body,
precious.
It's absolutely it turns a morning of just breakfast with your kids to the most sacred experience that you would pay millions of dollars for, when you're 90.
Yeah.
And then if I'm still grumpy, which sometimes happens, if I get in the shower, something that I do in the shower that really helps me kind of tap out of my bad mood is that I'll sit down in the shower if I have a minute and try to explain to an alien what it feels like to have hot water fall kind of on the palms of your hands. And I just really get focused with how interesting that experience is. Because when I'm in my head, I'm brooding or I'm arguing with some comment on TikTok or something, and I'm just suffering in the shower. I just suffer so much and brood. But if I can sit and explain to an alien what it feels like to have hot water, which is an experience that until a few years ago, most humans went their whole life without ever having a hot shower. And I just sit and appreciate it and try to explain to an alien what it feels like to have drops of hot water fall on your palms. And something about that, something about having to explain it to an alien can tap my language brain into just the pure experience of it. And it turns a broody shower where I argue with someone who isn't there into an incredible, incredible experience. And the combination of like doing that little memento mori in the morning and taking a shower like that can turn like even my incredibly neurotic brain into like, okay, and let's start our day. And like, it's going to be all right. And so, yeah, these little rituals, you know, I have some of my own and I have some in my family, but it's really been whatever effort you put into integrating some of those into your life, I just feel like they pay back 100-fold.
Yeah. Yeah, the contemplation of death, that's one I keep close as well. I did it for the full year of 2023, and it really does just bring a magnifying glass to the preciousness of each moment, you know, and helps you to let go of that trivial fight with your partner, helps you to really be present there for your kids. And something else, you know, and this happened kind of more in 2024, but it helped me understand how important grief is too. And I realized that, you know, in each moment, we are losing something, right? Our experience is continually changing. So each moment is lost. And so there's a steady sense of grief kind of humming in the background. And if we don't acknowledge that, it can build up. So, yeah, I have tried to carve out some space, whether it's daily or weekly, to just kind of grieve the little things.
Yeah. That's funny that you say
really
that,
useful.
because I also, like, I've done a lot of death work to where, like, it feels like death is in the room with me. Like, it's there, but it's not, you know, it's not something that gives me a lot of anxiety. And I've done a lot of death work and really feel like my nervous system has really made peace with just the brute fact that I'm going to die, and felt like I had kind of moved through that. And then my dad was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's and I just turned 40. And I realized that while I do feel very okay with the concept of death when I'm checking in with myself, you know, with this concept, something that is new for me this year is really also naming the little, like the lowercase d deaths, the little deaths that happen before the big D death. That like, I can play pickleball now, but I can't play soccer anymore. My dad, before he dies, is going to look at me and not know who I am. That's a death of a sort. And I'm doing like my inner work right now as far as my personal journey, and there's always something that like, oh, this is something that I'm working on that's really calling my attention. And this year, the thing that's really been calling my attention is not so much working with the capital D death, but with making more grief and conscious awareness and a better kind of conscious relationship with lowercase d deaths, the little deaths that I think I was compartmentalizing a little bit or hadn't really taken on. So it's interesting that you say that, because that I think that's going to be one of my big things that I work on for this year and really bring into awareness.
I love that. Well, Brittany, it has been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything you feel that's been left unsaid?
No, this was a lovely conversation. I love that we brought up death and just the preciousness of it, because it also even made just in this conversation just a little space for appreciation that you're a new human that I've never got to talk to before. Yeah. And we just got to stop our day and just check in with each other and just say, hey, what's life like going on for you over there? And knowing that it's that when I'm when I'm not in that space of awareness, it can just be another podcast that I get to check off of my day and then I go about my day. But I really appreciate that we brought up this concept of death and the preciousness of life, because it actually, even just in this conversation, helped me to open up to, it's just been really beautiful to just human with you for the past hour and get a sense of you.
Yeah, me as well. As soon as the death came up, it just, it's like, oh, hey, friend.
It makes this hour more precious, that like, hey, like we're really deciding with our limited time on earth to spend this hour together. And that just, that marked it with some preciousness that sometimes I lose when I get busy in my day.
Right. Yeah. Perfect ending. All right. Well, is there anywhere you'd like to send our listeners? I know you've written a book too, right?
Yeah. So I have a book called No Nonsense Spirituality. That's really for if you want to know kind of the elements of religion and kind of the science behind why this could be helpful for you, why this could be a helpful tool for you, and then options for how to maybe bring that tool better into your life. That's kind of the journey of the book. I'm not taking clients right now because I'm working on my dissertation, but I do have really in-depth courses on the main things that I do with clients, which is religious deconstruction, more of that feminine path of spirituality that I talked about, or de-patriarching your spirituality, nihilism, secular spirituality, death. I did a big course on death just because it seems to come up so often with my clients. The main themes that I do with clients, I try to make courses on for the times that I'm not able to take on more clients. So all of that is under No Nonsense Spirituality. That's the name of the book and the website, and also all my social media handles. So thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, and I'll put links to everything in the feed. So, well, thank you so much again, Brittany. I hope we continue our conversation.
Yeah, this was great.
All right, until next time.